This week on the show, I'm joined by a retired U.S. Army veteran, motivational speaker, and the co-founder of Sweethearts and Heroes, which is a game-changing organization helping to stamp out bullying and promote a positive culture in schools and communities across the U.S. and Canada. Rick Yarosh joins me on the show. On September 1st, 2006, Rick's life would be impacted and changed for the rest of his life. Rick was a part of a routine military mission in Iraq. While on the mission, his vehicle was hit with an IED, and within seconds, he was engulfed in flames. 60% of Rick's body from that incident became burnt. So not only was he impacted mentally, but physically, his life would never be the same again. Now retired from the Army, Rick gives inspirational talks to anyone who would like to hear his story. His story, although tragic in parts, is not a story of tragedy, he says. It is one of him being able to get through anything with a positive attitude. Most importantly, Rick can honestly say that he is happier than he has ever been now than he has in his entire life before. In this episode, we talk about his upbringing playing sports, why he enrolled in the Army, the moment his life has changed forever and shifted and altered on September 1st in 2006. In his words, we talk about why he wouldn't change anything that happened to him. We talk about how he handles the low moments, why he decided to fight for his life after wanting to stop that fight. We talk about the everyday challenges he faces after the incident and how he found hope after feeling hopeless. We talk about how it is becoming a father and a husband after his incident, and so much more. Rick's story is a touching one and a reminder for all that you are much stronger than you think. As long as you got breath in your body, you have the strength to keep going and to keep moving forward. This is an episode that you don't want to miss and will sure get encouragement from it. But hey, before you go, do me a favor and leave a rating and review of the podcast on all audio podcast streaming platforms, and let me know your thoughts and what you got from the episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, then do me a favor and subscribe to the channel before you go. So with all that being said, enjoy this week's episode with Rick Yarosh. Rick.
Akeem, how are you?
I'm well, my brother. How you doing today, man?
Doing great. Doing great.
Man, I see you in the hotel. You traveling?
How'd you know this was hotel decor?
Hey, man, I've been in a couple myself. I know the terrain.
What do you mean? You don't think this is the decor I have in my bedroom? Yeah, I am in Vermont right now, traveling.
Okay. Well, man, I want to be respectful of your time, man. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to start here, Rick. I'm big on gratitude, man. So give me 3 things you're grateful for today, Rick.
Life, my position where I get to talk to students, and my family.
Always beautiful, man. Well, Rick, I hear your story, man, and getting more into it, like it's really moving, and we'll get into that a little deeper here shortly. But let's go back a little bit, man. I want to ask, man, growing up, what was the dynamics like growing up for you in your home, in your city? Because from what I understand, man, you were captain of the football team and wrestling team in school, man. What do you remember most about those times?
Sports were my thing. I say if I didn't have sports, I wouldn't have graduated high school. I loved my sports. I loved wrestling. So I had 2 younger brothers as well, and they did sports as well. So my dad, we had wrestling mats in our house, which my mom did not love because they were in our living room for a while.
A lot of broken stuff, huh?
A lot of broken stuff. So we converted the garage into a wrestling room eventually. So the dynamic at home was a lot of athletics and a lot of family stuff. Like vacation for us was going to a campground somewhere and camping for 3 or 4 nights. That was kind of our life growing up. But yeah, athletics was a big part of it. We did a lot of stuff traveling and doing lots of different sports.
Seems like your family was pretty close, Rick. I think we learn a lot of lessons in life directly or indirectly. But what do you think some of those lessons that your parents instilled in you from an early age that kind of sticks with you today?
Yeah, I think about, not just growing up, but when I went through my recovery, just a positive attitude, having a positive, and not only just a positive attitude, but understanding that you have control of the environment around you with that positive attitude. And when I was in the hospital, my parents never let any negative talk come into my room. They
Wow.
never let any negative conversation come into my room, because even if they didn't know I could hear it or not, because I was in a coma at one point, they didn't they didn't allow it because they didn't know if I could hear it. They didn't want me to get any of that negative stuff. So I only caught the positive things that were going on. And that's just, you're a product of your environment and you have control over your environment. And I've learned that a lot from them.
It's powerful, man. Now, Rick, after high school, right, unless something or someone introduces you to certain things, it's not really a forethought of you to do. So, man, like, how did you get into the Army? Like, what was the deciding factor that kind of led you down that path? Because I don't know many people who wake up and say, you know what? Yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah. Well, I knew I needed a change in my life
Yes, sir.
because high school kind of turned into after high school. Like high school was barely get by, and I did. I barely graduated, and then I went out and I barely got by there too. And I knew I needed a life change. And yeah, I was affected by a specific person
Mhm.
to help me join, and it was actually somebody who had died over in Iraq, and it was somebody who I knew because he wrestled, so that athletics just had a big part in my whole life. And I was at my grandmother's house on Easter Sunday of 2004, and on her coffee table was our local newspaper, and the headline read, "Sydney grad killed in Iraq." And when I looked underneath the headline, I saw the picture of the soldier they were talking about, and that's when I knew who it was, Isaac Nieves. And like I said, he wrestled for Sydney, I wrestled for Windsor, and two small towns that close to each other, you just know each other well. And when I realized that he had just given his life for myself and for other people, and then I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not doing anything for anyone. I'm not making myself better. And if I'm not making myself better, then I'm definitely not making other people better. So the day after I read that article in the paper is the day that I actually ended up joining the military. So it was a single person. There was a lot of little pieces before that, but that single person in that article is what drove me to that recruiter's office the next day.
Man, I got a lot of respect for that, man, because that would turn a lot of people away from it, but you ran towards it. But was there any pushback from your family, Rick? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, were they saying, like, did they ever say, hey, like, let's really think this out here? Right? Did you ever get any of that?
No, I think that was at the point where my parents were like, yes, yes, he's doing something.
Yeah.
Um, my mom was nervous for sure. My dad was not though. And when I actually went and signed up to be a cavalry scout, that's the job I got. And when I went and I signed up for the testing or signed up for the jobs, they didn't have many jobs available. So when I called my dad and he's like, "Are you in? Did you sign?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "What job did you get?" I said, "Bath and laundry specialist." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "Why did you even join?"
Yeah. But you
Like,
know
what are you
what,
gonna
man?
do with
That's a valuable skill. That's a valuable skill. Not a lot of
that?
people
It
know.
is.
You know,
But
you
he's like, what are you gonna do with that if you get? Because I don't think he thought I would do 20 years in the military, but I think he thought, okay, learn some skills in the military, get out, and then maybe do something with those skills. So he was thinking bath and laundry specialist. Like, what are you gonna do with that? But I just want to play a game with him, and I did, and I won because he got mad. And so I joined as a cavalry scout, and I don't know what skills that was gonna give me either when I got out, but yeah, I don't know. It was a job that I really wanted. If I was gonna go in with the skill set that I had with athletics and stuff like that, school wasn't my thing. I knew that a combat job would be my thing anyways. So and the cavalry scout was a combat job.
okay, Rick. So walk me through when you get there, right? Because it's a whole different mentality that you have to have, right? You went into it with this selfless act that got you motivated and inspired to go and do something that not a lot of people would do. But you get there, right? I'm talking about, you're putting on the army, right? You're the uniform, and you're waking up early, and all these different things that come into mind. Because I have a couple of people who went through that process, And they said, man, I wasn't really ready for the type of discipline that was kind of, and like how they prepare you mentally by breaking you down, so to speak. So walk me through a little bit about that. Was it a shock for you?
Yeah, let's just say I am not a morning person at all. I'm still not. Their army didn't do anything there to change that. But no, physically, basic training was tough, but not really that tough. Like, and I had graduated almost 4 years earlier, so I was out of shape by the time I got to basic training,
Mhm.
because I stopped doing all those sports and barely get by attitude, and so I got out of shape. But then when I got there, I got in great shape again really quickly. So that wasn't that tough, but the mental part was really, really hard. It really was. And I was 21 when I went there.
Yeah.
So when I got there, I was one of the older guys, actually. A lot of them were 17, 18 years old. And one thing you learn in the military is that not one person gets in trouble. Everybody gets
Everybody
in
gets in
trouble.
trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. And when a 17-year-old gets there, they don't give a crap
Yeah.
if they're going to get anyone else in trouble. So when we were in trouble, it was usually because of something they did that they knowingly did. And that was extremely frustrating for me. And it was like every day, something like that. So the mental part of it was probably the hardest. And knowing that we were going to be there for 4 months with the same drill sergeants every single day, we knew that was not going to be easy because I look at them today as people who have positively impacted me in my life, and but I think at that moment I didn't think of it that way too often. I thought of them as oh man, I got to see them again tomorrow. But in the end, I knew what they were doing for me was going to better me.
Okay, Rick, let's go a little bit to 2006, man. Before we talk about the moment of time that changed your life, you go to Iraq 2006. What was going through your mind when you got there, right? And I say that because there's always two sides to the story. There's what the news is telling you, right? What the information we're getting, and then there's what is actually happening over there. So, what was like a typical day to day like for you when you got over there?
Yeah, so I'll tell you actually a week before, or not a week before, a couple weeks before we even deployed there, our command sergeant major sat our group down, our big, I think it was our whole battalion. Maybe it was one of the companies, I don't remember. It was a lot of us. And he sat us down and he said to us some words that have always stuck with me, the exact words. And he said, "You're not all coming home."
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that was kind of, and I knew I was going to war in a
Wow.
couple weeks, but
Absolutely.
I'm going to war. I know people dying, but when he said that, it was real. And then, we go to Iraq, and I can remember driving from Kuwait up to Baghdad. I was riding in one of the Humvees, and I can remember this is my first tour there. I've never been there before, and I was riding with somebody who had been there before, and he said, "Hey, you see that burning tire up there?" He's like, "That's not just a burning tire." And that's when I realized that everything around me had to be looked at differently. It wasn't just a burning tire; it was probably a marker for an IED that somebody had set off in the distance.
Mhm.
But I didn't realize that. Now I had to be aware of every single thing. And then, the day after we got there, I was in the place that we were staying, and somebody handed me a little pamphlet, and it was for a memorial service they were going to be having on a soldier that day, a soldier that had actually drowned in Iraq. His vehicle had tipped over in a canal, and he drowned in the canal. Um, Kind of a rude awakening, and
Yeah.
that was
Seriously.
the reality of it. That was the reality of it.
2006, September 1st, Rick. Um, this is the part that changed your life and impacted you in ways that you probably still haven't fathomed to some extent. Walk me through that day, Rick, because there's there's sometimes like in people's lives where you wake up and you may feel like a little off. You know what I'm saying? Like something may not feel right and you're not sure what it is, but then you go throughout the day and something happens and you're just like, that is what it was. Walk me through this day for you. Was there any of that I just described?
Well, so that was 9 months into my deployment. I felt that way every single day when I first got there.
Yeah.
Every day we felt that, and I would, we prayed every day before we went out. We would get all together, and at least in our vehicle, everybody in our vehicle would pray about going out on that mission. And 9 months in, you didn't do that anymore, just because it became it was just every day. You know, it was just like, okay, this is our job. You know, in the beginning, it was like every day you thought about it, you thought about it, you thought about it. 9 months in, it was just like, okay, it's time to go out on our mission. And that's what we did. And so I don't think there was any of that day, but there were other days that I felt that a lot. And things did happen, not just to me, but to a lot of the other guys as well. So that day though, I didn't feel it, but it was a day just like every other day. Loading up in the vehicle with my buddies, Sergeant Montez, Specialist Lowe, myself, and going out on a mission.
Walk me through how it happened, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, that's the day everything changed. And now today, I will tell you everything changed for the better, but that's not how I saw it that day, certainly. So September 1st, 2006, when we were out on a patrol on a road we had been on many times before, and I was in a Bradley fighting vehicle, which is basically a smaller tank. And we were the fifth vehicle in our convoy, which there were only five in the convoy. So that means we were last in the convoy, which also means that we are rear security, which means you're staring backwards and all you can see is dust that's being kicked up from all the other vehicles. So not the best position to be in. So we decided to move up to be the fourth vehicle. And when we moved up to be the fourth vehicle, about 2 minutes later is when our vehicle was hit with an IED. And IED is an improvised explosive device, and it's basically a bomb that was never intended to be buried underneath the ground. It was meant to be shot out of the air, but they buried it under the ground. My vehicle ran over it, and it exploded, and it went through the bottom of my vehicle up into the turret where I was sitting. And the big problem with that was the fact that the turret also has our fuel tank, and it hit the fuel tank, and it covered me in fuel, and instantly I was on fire, and so were my buddies, and we all had to get out. And the first thing I knew I had to do was get out, so I climbed through the top, and thank God that day I left the top open, the hatch above me open. Normally I did not because we weren't supposed to. That day I did. So I left it open. I climbed through the top. Once I got to the top, I knew the next thing I had to do was I had to get to the ground. But there was big problems with that. First one was 10 feet to the ground. And that's easy to imagine because the rim on a basketball hoop is 10 feet off of the ground. So long jump to the ground. Bigger problem though was the fact that I was blind. And that's because my face was on fire and the fire was covering my eyes. I couldn't see. So, we talk about taking leaps of faith in our life, and that was a true leap of faith I had to take. I just had to jump, hope I would make it to the ground, and that's what I did. I did make it to the ground, but when I landed on the ground, I couldn't brace myself for the landing because I couldn't see it. So when I landed, I actually broke my leg very badly, below my knee, and I ended up with an amputation below my knee later on in the hospital. So no, I did the first two steps of survival. I got out of the vehicle and I got to the ground, but now I got to put the fire out and stop, drop, and roll is what we were all taught to do. And that's what I did. And it's the only thing I knew to do in that moment. And it didn't work because there was too much fuel and too much fire. And most regrettable thing in my life came next. And that's when I just laid on my back and I stared up into the sky and I accepted the fact that I would die. I couldn't put that fire out. I couldn't stand up and run. My leg was broken. And even if I could, where was I going? My face was on fire. So I gave up. And when I talk to students in schools, I talk about hope in this point because I gave up on something extremely important. It's something that we all carry with us every day. And it's what moves us forward every day. And that's hope. And we say that hope stands for hold on, possibilities exist. And sometimes it's hard to see those possibilities that exist for the future, even especially when we're going through something really difficult. But I can tell you that the possibilities are amazing if you choose to find amazing possibilities. I just didn't know that at the moment, and I gave up. But thankfully, it was only for a second because I ended up rolling in one direction, and I actually ended up falling into a canal that was there. Wow. A canal that I didn't know was there, and it put the fire out, saved my life.
Rick, one, thank you for sharing that, man. My faith has gotten me through a lot of things in life and still gets me through a lot of things in life, a lot of dark moments. The fact that you didn't know a canal was there and a canal was there, that's not coincidence to me. I don't really believe in that.
No.
And the fact that you're here, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a testimony of God's grace on you.
Yeah.
Rick, you just spoke about hopelessness, right? And to get back up and to continue fighting, and you probably didn't know what the heck the next steps were going to look like, but regardless, you knew you had an extensive path of care to even getting back to breathing and everything. Mm-hmm. Hopelessness can force us to dig a hole and isolate ourselves, and we often make our beds in that hole. What kept you hopeful, Rick, and gave you the strength to get back up and keep fighting when you had all reasons not to?
Well, I'll tell you right now, thank God I couldn't isolate myself. Like that's like the natural reaction that we have is to isolate ourselves and like I don't want to talk to anybody. Well, no, you do want to talk to you just won't talk to them. And isolating ourselves is dangerous. And I couldn't isolate myself because when I went into that hospital, I was surrounded by amazing people. And I will tell you right now, that's where my drive came from. Yes, you certainly have to have a will to live. Like I wanted to live. But I also needed help from people around me to help me get there.
Yeah.
Like, can't people can't just say I am the toughest and I just got through it on my own. You're lying to yourself, man. You didn't get through it on your own. There were other people around you who were helping you. You might not see it that way, but they were there. And like my doctors and this is easy for me to say, my doctors and my nurses, obviously, I wouldn't be here without them. But I'm even talking my chaplain. I'm talking my parents. I'm talking about people who just came into my room and talked to me. Didn't do anything for me physically to save my life that way, but just talked to me and gave me the hope that I was lacking. Like when I was in the hospital and I saw my face for the first time, that was pretty awful. That
Hmm.
was pretty terrible, and it was an accident. I saw it in the reflection of my laptop screen. My mom gave me my laptop, and I looked in, and there my face was. And when I saw it, it was awful. But again, I had people there come into my room and help me get that hope back. They got me through that moment because sometimes that's all it is a moment that we need to get through it. Sometimes we make those moments last too long, and because we isolate ourselves or we don't look for help from other people. But I couldn't do that again. So people were coming to me and they were helping me through that. Now, when I got out of the hospital, it was different. I could isolate myself, but I know that that's not the answer.
Yeah.
I need to turn to people when I'm struggling because there are things in life that I don't know how to get through on my own. That's plain and simple. And that's hard for people to say because it's saying that they can't do something on their own. Well, who cares? You can't do it on your own. Like yourself, like you had all your coaches and all those people in your life. Like you aren't who you are today only because you are who you are. You've
Yeah.
had people help you. And I'm a product of so many amazing people in my life.
Maya Angelou has a quote, Rick, that says, "I come as one, but I stand with 10,000." Meaning
It's
there's a
amazing.
lot of people
Oh, it's
that
amazing.
that helped along the way. So I completely get those sentiments. I've never really understood like the self-made thing or the self.
Uh,
Even if you thought that, there is
yes.
still someone who has been praying for you for
Yes.
you to get that type of things to align up. So
Yes.
me and you, 100% with that, man.
Oh, I am on you with that one. Like I think about this. I have people who tell me that, and I don't blame them. I think they're just looking at it wrong. They're just not seeing it right. I say even the person that tells me, you know what, I did it on my own. My parents, they were terrible parents, and they didn't lead me the right way, and I didn't want to be like them, and I'm not like them. Okay, so don't. So you're saying that you're self-made. So I'm not even talking about I'm talking about your parents helped you make you who you are.
Yes,
Even
sir.
though they're not in the positive way, they still were of influence in your life. You can't tell me even you are self-made. So I just here's what I always say that they're just missing some letters in that statement. It's selfishly made. You're
Yes,
just not
sir.
able to give anybody else some credit. Give some people some credit, man. They deserve it.
Rick, beautifully said, man. Next question that just came to mind as you were talking, man. You said you looked in the mirror and you saw your face for the first time, and you said, "Man, it was scary." Right? That's the physical things that happened from the accident, from the incident. How long, Rick, did it take you to feel like yourself again? Right? Because you saw your reflection, and sometimes the world is a cruel place, man. You know what I'm saying? And people can know that something has happened, but they don't take the time to know the backstory, understand what just transpired here. How long, Rick, did it take you to feel like yourself internally?
Never.
Mm,
Thankfully.
mm,
Thankfully, not that I was a bad person before, but I'm a better person now.
yeah.
And that's just because of what I went through. But I know where we're getting at with that. And
Yeah.
I would say about 5 years is after my incident is when I could finally start being okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, I was accepting it. That was kind of what I had to do. Just accept that this is what it is. So I tell you today, I say I'm glad I didn't get back to who I am because I'm more comfortable with the way I look today than when I looked like 17 years ago before my injury happened. And
Yeah.
I would say I was a pretty handsome dude. But you know what? I'm more comfortable today than I was back then. I've got no one to compete with anymore. Like I'm not no, and that's what we do
Wow.
our whole lives. We're competing with each other constantly in the way we look and the way we do things. And man, I'm not competing with anybody anymore. If what, I just realized if I believe I can do better, then I can do better.
Wow.
And I don't know if anybody else is doing that. It doesn't matter to me. I know I can do better. I can do better.
Rick, what are some of the physical challenges that you have day to day, right? Because this you wear the scars.
There, there they are, right there. Yeah, my hands. That's one of them. My hand just. But it's funny to me because 17 years later, and a lot, shorter than that. But today, 17 years later, like people watch me do something and they see the struggle. I don't see the struggle. I just see it as my life. Like
Mm.
I just see it as another. Like I dropped something the other day, and somebody came up and they were going to help me pick it up, and I totally appreciate that. I love when people are willing to help other people. And I was like, I got it. Now I got it. I'm going to get it. And I got it. But they saw me struggling. They saw the difficulty that I was dealing with, and in my mind, that's just a part of my day. I drop stuff. I got to pick things up. It's going to take me a little longer. I mow my lawn. It's going to take me a little longer. I cook dinner. It's going to take me a little longer. Now, other people would watch me do all of those things and say, man, Rick's struggling with those things. No, I don't know. It's just a part of my life. And if I looked at everything that other people saw me as struggling with as a struggle in my life, oh man,
Yeah.
my life would be a big struggle.
Yeah.
And I just don't choose to look at it that way anymore. But that's over time. That's come with the time that I've been doing this, and it's just a part of my life. So my hands are a big one. I struggle with that. But I would say my biggest thing is my prosthetic, my leg, and that kind of my hands don't sideline me. I got two little girls. I got an 11-year-old and a 3-year-old, and if my hands have an injury on them, I can still go to their softball game. I can still go to their school. If my leg is in bad shape, it's really hard for me to get there because me and my wheelchair just don't get along. I don't really like being in a wheelchair. So I don't go and I sideline myself. So my leg is the bigger issue than my hands. And most people would be like, wow, you'd rather take, I mean, I wouldn't take anything back because that's just not possible. But my leg is certainly the more difficult thing for me than my hands even is because my hands, I'll figure things out. And if I can't, I'll ask for help. My leg's not working. Guess what? Nobody's picking my butt up and carrying my big butt around all day long. That's not going to happen.
Man, that's a great perspective to have, man. And I know it took some time to get there, but the fact that, which brings me to my next question, man. I believe through pain, our toughest moments, the purpose can be formed from it. If you got the right perspective, you can have some of the toughest things that happen to you and you can turn it into something good. You've turned what happened to you in that, and you're a living testimony and a walking light in this world, Rick. But I want to talk about Sweethearts and Heroes, what you're wearing on your shirt right there. What's the story behind that, Rick? And what is the message you hope to continue to spread and share moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Sweethearts and Heroes started as an anti-bullying organization. The word bully in the 16th century actually meant sweetheart. Like the word sweetheart is a very endearing term that we all know it as, but in the 16th century, so was the word bully. And it was somebody who pushed you over and over and over again to make you better. Like you think about your coaches in your life. Like those are sweethearts that pushed you, even on days you didn't want to get up and go do those exercises and
A
do
lot of
those.
days, Rick. A lot of days.
Right. Yeah. There were days in the hospital I didn't want to get out of that bed, but I had to. People had to push me to do it. So, the word sweethearts comes from the old word bully. So when we go into schools, we try to create 16th century bullies, which are these people who push people, but to make them better. not to hurt them, not to make them worse, to make them better. So that's how it started. But today, and we still have the similar presentation, but we can take the word bully right out of the presentation. It's the same exact presentation. It really is. Schools want the word bully in it because that's a big topic of today. But we can take the word out, and it's the same presentation. It's about taking care of each other. It's about treating people with respect. It's about understanding what you're capable of to do for other people. Like I talk about hope. That's my big part. HOPE, hold on, possibilities exist. That's what it stands for. And those there's kids in schools, and that's who we mostly talk to, is kids in schools who are struggling. And they should not be struggling because there are so many people around them, students, that can do something for them. They just don't recognize what they're truly capable of. But my life was changed from a 5 or 6 year old little girl in a restaurant one day. When she saw me in a restaurant, like every kid did, was afraid of me. It was very obvious to me when that was happening. And this little girl, she saw me, she was afraid of me. Her grandfather was sitting next to her, and he saw her that she was afraid, but he told her to come over and say hello to me. He said it very quietly. He didn't want me to hear it. But I was, at that time in my recovery, early on in my recovery, I was listening to everything. I was watching everything. And she didn't want to come over. She didn't move. So he actually told her again. He said, go say hi to him. So she did start to come over to me, and I didn't want her coming over to my table all the way. I knew she was uncomfortable. I didn't want to make it worse. So when she got halfway over, as nicely as I could say to her, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" But when I said that, she stopped dead in her tracks, turned around, ran back to her grandpa. And at that time, the hopelessness that I was feeling at that time was the fact that little kids, just didn't accept me in this world, and they saw me as a monster. And that was really, really hard for me. And at that time, I needed somebody to help me. So that little girl, when she ran away from me and she got back to her grandpa, she looked at him. She said, "Grandpa, he's really nice."
Wow, wow,
Yeah,
wow,
that's not what I thought she would say. And so
wow.
that little girl, 5 or 6 years old, doesn't have a clue about this world yet. She changed my life forever with something she didn't know she had. And what she has is hope. And what we have is hope. And we can give it to other people. If she could give it to me and change my life forever, she can give it to other people. We can give it to other people, and we can change their lives forever. That's just how hope works. It's something we're born with.
Rick, I got two more questions for you, man. That was beautifully said. Wow. Um, Sticking on the topic of hope, Rick, you know, when everything happened to you, man, and you're in recovery and you're coming out, a lot of question marks moving forward in many different areas, right? We're talking about everyday living, how you're going to, again, simple things you just said, picking up stuff, dropping stuff, right? But there's also relationships as well too, Rick, and that can be challenging as well. You're a husband and a father, and this happened to you after the accident, Rick. What does those two things mean to you, man?
My family is everything in my life. My family is everything in my life. And when I told you I saw my face in that screen that day in that hospital, when I saw my face for the first time, I'm telling you right now, like I told you, hopelessness set in, and I don't. But a big part of that hopelessness is coming from the fact that I believed that I would be lonely forever. Like who's going, come on, this isn't the thing that guys want to talk about, but like who's going to love me, talking about that, relationships and stuff like that. So who's going to give me opportunity when I leave this place? Who's going to give me a chance? But biggest one, who's going to love me?
Yeah.
Like who's going to choose to wake up to this every morning? That's the way I felt about it. But when I got out of the hospital and I started to become comfortable with who I was, because that's where I'm at today. I'm extremely comfortable with who I am, is when I could start talking to people, and I
Hmm.
could start growing even more relationships. And when I first started wanting to build relationships, I started with the place everybody goes, online dating. And I always tell people that I met my wife through a mutual friend named Matt Chacom.
Hmm.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
I
Yeah,
got
so
it. That's a good
Match
one, man.
Match.com. So I was on there, and people when they saw me on there, their first, I would get people that reach out to me all the time, and they say, "Hey, thank you for your service." That's kind of where it would start. That's not really where I wanted it to start.
Yeah.
So like, because they all knew who I was, and my wife Amy, when she reached out to me for the first time, she didn't know who I was, had no clue that I was in the military, nothing about me. She saw what I looked like. She knew I was burned very badly, but she didn't know anything about me other than the way I looked. And she was still interested. And she's just a special, special woman. And my two girls are amazing. Yeah, but I didn't think I'd have those things. I did not think I would have a family after my injury. Thank God. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm glad I did not have my family when I got injured. I am extremely glad for that because of what I saw other men and women going through with families, not only for their kids, but for their spouses who when you say for better or for worse, when you say those marriage vows, for worse, you're not signing up for somebody who was just burned 80% of their body. And I saw people leaving their spouses in that hospital, and that was extremely hard to watch. I'm so glad. Now, my wife Amy, she married me after I looked like this, so she wasn't going to go anywhere. But it's funny. I was talking to some seventh graders a couple weeks ago, and this boy in the front row, and I was just in a classroom doing some Q&A, and he looks at me and he said, "You met your wife after your injury?" And I'm like, "Yeah, after my injury." And he's like, "After your injury?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, after my injury." He's like, "Man, your spitting game must be fire." And I always say, "Yeah, man, she didn't marry me because I was handsome as heck."
Man, leave it to the kids to give
I
it
love it.
straight without any paper behind it, man. Um,
Absolutely.
Last question that I have for you, Rick, man. When you're having a tough day, man, and you went to war, right? You've seen a lot of different things, and I think one of the craziest thing to me is when a person goes over there and sees what you see, and they expect you to come back and to live this normal life. On top of that, what you had to go through, so you're living with stuff that you see and physically all the stuff that happened, man. When you're having tough days, man, how do you pick yourself up?
I just know for a fact that it will get better. That it will get better. I try not to have a bad day. I will have bad moments, that's for sure. And that's not to say I won't have a bad day because I know I will, but I try not to. Um, because the moments, there are some days that we have bad moments in, and then we let those moments control our entire day. Like I think about the guy who is driving down the road and he gets cut off in the morning at 7 a.m. and he's still talking about it at 9 p.m. It ruined his day.
Yeah.
I don't let those things ruin my day. It might be a bad moment for me and I might be mad for a second, but I got to get past that. And I don't let it take over my day. But then if I do have a bad day because of something that's big that's going on in my life, I try not to let it turn into a couple days. And if it does, I don't want it to go a week. I don't want it to go a month because the longer you go, the harder it is to pull yourself out of it. So I just don't, I allow myself to have bad moments and even a bad day once in a while, but I try not to make them any longer than that because I know it's hard to get out of.
Rick, thank you so much for your time, man, and for all that you are doing. I believe that uh, there's always hope in the world if we know where to look. And a lot
Yeah,
of times we just don't know where to look. So thank you for all that you do, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing. What's the best way for people to continue to support, to follow up with you, and to learn more about Sweethearts and Heroes?
yeah. So on our website, we have tons of information on our website, sweetheartsandheroes.com. You can follow us on any of the social media. I say any, like I know a lot about social media because I'm 40. Facebook and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so we in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all that stuff. I think we might even have a TikTok. I don't know, but yeah. So you can find us on all that stuff. We have some YouTube videos. But yeah, we have a lot of content. You just search us on Google and you'll find a lot of content on sweetheartsandheroes.com.
Rick, thank you so much for your time, man. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of Vermont.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure what else is out there, but it's summertime a little bit, so it should be warm at least.
A lot of mountains here, Akeem, a lot of mountains. I appreciate the time that I spent with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great rest of your night, man, and I will talk to you later.